Meeting of April 14th, 2022 at 12 p.m. This meeting is open to continue the public hearing from last week's session on 59 Quabog Ave. So at this point in time, we now have. Yeah, so we also, just for formalities, we will be recording, this meeting will be recorded today. So at this point in time, we don't need to reopen the public hearing because it's already opened. It's a continuation from last week. And so we will be focusing our questions today around the electrical violations that were found. And so at this point in time, I will turn the floor over to Town Council.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. My name is Jeffrey Blake. I'm here from KP Law, your Town Council. And it's my understanding, Madam Chair, that we only have one witness left, and that's the electrical inspector, because, as you know, from the order to correct, there are a number of issues with the electrical at the subject property, under the sanitary code, health inspectors have the ability, a violation of a building code or the electrical code is a violation of the sanitary code, and it was cited. There was also separately cited by the electrical inspector, and I'd like to have the electrical inspector come up. And your name is Alfred Banfill? Banfill, yeah. Can you put your right hand in the air? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, sir. And can you state your name for the record?
My name is Alfred W. Banfill.
Can you spell the last name, just so we all know?
Banfill.
Okay, sir. Are you currently employed?
No,
Okay,
I work for the town part-time doing the inspections.
okay, but that's employment, right?
Yes,
Okay, and when you say inspections, what kind of inspections do you do?
electrical inspections.
Okay, and what is your qualifications to be electrical inspector?
You need to be licensed, and you also need to, along with the 15 hours of continued education, you need to do an additional 6 hours to be an inspector of wires.
All right, you say license, that means you have a master's electrician's license?
And a journeyman's.
Okay, and how long have you have to get a journeyman in order to get master's, right? How long have you had your master's license?
If my math is correct, 46 years,
Wow, so you've been doing this for a little
for a
while?
while.
Okay, and when you say 15 hours of continuing education, is that per year?
It's on a code cycle. So
Okay.
I believe it's every 3 years.
All right, and are you up to date on all that?
Yes.
Okay, and you are the electrical inspector here at the town of Oxford, correct?
Yes,
Okay, do you know why you're here today, sir?
yes.
Can you explain to the board what your understanding is why you're here?
On the property, there wasn't a wiring permit pulled for the wiring that was done there.
But are you here to testify regarding electrical inspection that you did at the property?
Yes,
Okay, how many inspections did you do?
3.
Okay. And during those inspections, did you find any electrical violations?
I went into the garage
Yep.
to, when I did the solar inspection, to see if any wiring was run through the garage.
What do you mean the solar inspection?
They had both a service change done and a solar installation there.
Okay. And you went there and you inspected for the solar. Did you see other violations while you were there?
No,
Okay, so I'm looking at, there's a couple of different, what I'm going to call orders to correct issued by you in my file. But I want to focus your attention what is Exhibit 6. It's a March 10, 2022 order. I'm going to provide this order to you, sir. And I want you to just take a minute, familiarize yourself with the order, because I want to ask some questions, and I'm sure that the board will have some questions. When you get done reading that, just look up and I'll start asking. And for the property owners, do you have copies of Exhibit 6?
Yes.
From the last time? Okay, good. All right, sir. Can you explain to the board here what Exhibit 6 is?
It's, my site evaluation on that date, found that there was electrical work performed there without permits.
Okay, so let's stop just for a second, and I hate to do this to you, but
That's okay.
maybe it's a little easier. It's done without a permit. Is that lawful?
A homeowner can do their own electrical work.
Okay, stop. A homeowner can. Does that mean, that means if I have a commercial kitchen in my home, that I can wire a 220 stove?
Yes,
So this is the so-called homeowner's exception to the building, to the electrical code, correct? And what are the requirements? Do I have to just own the home, or does it have to be for residential purposes?
residential purposes.
Okay, so if I have a commercial kitchen in my home, that's not a residential purpose, is it?
You're right.
Okay, all right, so, go ahead, so, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it's a little easier, because my mind goes.
But a homeowner won't be issued a permit, nor will they get an inspection.
Well, so what you're saying is that a homeowner can do whatever electrical they want, and they don't have to have an inspection, they don't have to, so why are we here? It's my understanding of the code, and I'll show you an advisory, and you may have an do you have this advisory?
No, I have this.
Does, I'm talking to yeah.
This one is new. I have to print it out for you. This would be what's next exhibit. Thank you.
I'm gonna show you this advisory. So, a homeowner under the electrical code is supposed to notify the electrical inspector that they're gonna do work, correct?
They don't have to.
So they can just do anything that they want there, and we don't have any permits, we don't have any inspections, and they burn down the house and doesn't matter?
This is America. You can do your own electrical work. You won't be issued a permit, nor will you get an inspection.
Okay, so let's go to your order here, your order to correct. So why did you issue this order to correct?
I was asked to do a site evaluation.
Yeah,
I noticed that there was electrical work performed without an electrical permit.
okay. And you're saying that a permit was needed?
Yes,
Is that because of the commercial nature of the enterprise there?
in residential, both.
Okay. But didn't you just tell me that if it's a homeowner, they don't need it? Because I think what the homeowners are saying is, we're homeowners, we don't need to have a permit, we don't need to be inspected.
But you won't get, as ironic as it may seem,
Yeah.
they won't be issued a permit, and they won't get an electrical inspection.
Okay. And what did you observe at the site when you went there? Did you observe any violations?
The rough wiring was concealed.
Okay, so you couldn't see it.
No,
Did they pull a permit at any time?
no,
There wasn't one permit open at the property?
by a licensed electrician, yes.
Okay. And has that permit been closed out?
No,
Have you inspected for that permit?
no,
And when you went there, you found that electrical had been done but covered up?
I didn't go there to do that. Can't do a final inspection if I haven't performed a rough inspection, so I can't confirm that the installation is in compliance.
Okay. So when you went there, did you observe many, or at least a couple of large outlet strips?
Yes,
How were they hardwired into the panel?
no.
Were they plugged into the wall?
Like, some of them in the ceiling, some of them are in the wall.
Okay, and did you look at the outlet they were going into to determine whether or not it was sufficient to handle that kind of voltage?
I couldn't confirm that.
Okay. All right, so what is your notice to correct for then?
To do both an electrical, a rough and a final inspection on the installation there.
Did they do it?
There hasn't been a permit pulled
So
for the
there's been-
electrical work.
There's been no rough or final inspection done?
No, there's no permit pulled.
Do you
for
know
that
how
work.
much work was done without a permit?
Inside the garage,
What was in the garage?
various outlets.
And is that the only place it was done? Did you go inside the house?
I didn't do an inspection inside the house, but I believe there's a bathroom in there too.
Okay.
Yeah,
If-
back room.
If an electrical outlet or if, if an electrical outlet isn't properly wired, can that cause a fire?
Yes,
Can it cause electrocution, but for somebody in the building who happens to touch it if it's not grounded correctly?
yes.
And did you notice any ground fault interrupt GFI breakers in the box?
Not at this time, no. Oh, I'm sorry. They were installed, but I didn't inspect them because there wasn't a rough or final inspection performed.
Okay, so you didn't do anything because you weren't asked to inspect?
There was no permit.
So you can't sit here today and say that isn't a fire hazard, correct?
Without a permit, I can't answer that.
Okay. All right, I have nothing further. Certainly the board can ask whatever questions it may have.
Okay. Dina, do you have any questions?
I think that you answered this, but I might have missed it. Initially, and I remember from our last meeting, there was an initial permit from a licensed electrician that was requested from the town? There was?
Yes,
Okay. Okay. And no rough inspection was done after that permit was pulled?
correct.
Okay. And how would someone get a rough inspection completed?
Well, all the wiring is now concealed, so in order to,
No, once they had the permit requested through the town and it was granted, the permit was granted, how would the homeowner have a rough inspection completed? What would they need to do?
pull a permit for the rough wiring that was done in the garage.
Do you know if that was done?
No.
You don't know, or it
No,
wasn't
it
done?
hasn't been done.
Okay, thanks.
So just, are you done, Dina?
Yep, thank you.
So the reason you were there for the inspection initially was the GFI for which a permit had been pulled. Is that correct?
I never did that inspection after the GFCI breakers were installed, because there was no permit on the rough or the final wiring.
And those are separate permits?
Yeah,
that need
they would have to
pulled?
be, but they don't, there isn't one.
Okay, so in addition to so what was the first permit for, the GFI permit that was pulled by the electrician?
To install GFCI protection as a safety,
Okay, but not to add wiring in order to do that?
no, did the wiring in the panel.
Okay. So, I'm sorry, I'm still trying to clarify. The permit was to install the GFI breakers in the panel?
Yes,
Okay. So it had nothing to do with sockets or wiring, which is why a separate permit would be needed?
yes.
Okay. Okay. And when you, so the original purpose for you going in was to inspect for that original permit?
For the GFCIs,
Right.
I didn't perform one because I couldn't confirm the wiring the rough wiring and the final and all the grounding was performed without a permit for the wiring.
All right, so I'm trying to understand, if the permit was to install the GFCI breakers in the panel, not to install socket or wiring, and when you saw that wiring had been done, that interrupted the completion of the inspection? that you said you didn't do the inspection when this document, with the violations, that inspection was caused by, you asked to go in and do a different kind of inspection, and that's where this was generated, or was it in the normal course of?
Did a site evaluation
Okay.
on the February 10th.
Okay, at the request of?
The building, fire,
Okay, so then I understand, all right. So you never had the opportunity to do the original inspection, but you were asked to do a site inspection? and-
Yes.
And that's when you witnessed all of the rest of this? All right, that's clear. All right, thank you.
you're welcome.
Any other questions? So I just have another clarifying question, because I'm just trying to understand the difference here, because I'm not a wiring expert by all means at all. So a permit was pulled and issued on April 28th for April 28th, 2021. It's permit EP 21105 by a licensed electrician to install GFCI protection on the garage receptacles. So once that permit was pulled, the electrical inspector, the electrical contractor, once they've installed them, should have contacted the town for a rough inspection. Is that correct?
Couldn't perform a rough inspection because the wiring is concealed.
Okay, but I just want to understand the process. So if they installed the GFCI, then what they would have done was called you for an inspection on the rough GFCI installation. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
And then, once it's finalized, then they would call you or contact the town for a final inspection. How does the rough wiring fit in with the GFCI receptacles? So that's where I'm not understanding it. So you said there was no permit pulled for the wiring, right? That was done
Right.
by the homeowners, which you stated that they don't need to pull a permit for that. Which was stated at the beginning. So I want to understand why we can't just do an inspection on the GFCI and there needs to be an inspection on the rough wiring. This is where I need your professional expertise. I don't understand wiring. I just know it's all connected and I turn my lights on, right? So, but how come you can't just inspect the GFCI? Why do you have to inspect the wiring that was done by the homeowner and which did not need a permit pulled?
Because the rough wiring and the final inspection was never permitted, that I don't have the authority to approve work that was done without a permit.
Okay.
So they would have to get a licensed electrician, needs to pull an electrical permit for the work, and the electrician would ensure that all the work that was done and taking responsibility for that is proper.
So the rough wiring that the homeowners did is connected to the GFCI receptacles. Is that correct?
In the fact that I can't do a final inspection if I didn't perform a rough inspection on the wiring.
Okay, so just to make, because I'm trying to understand this. So the wiring that the homeowners did is connected to the GFCI protection and the garage receptacles. And so you can't properly inspect the GFCI with the wires that are connected because you don't know if those were installed properly.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I wanted to understand. Thank you.
Okay, just to go back, I thought we said that the original permit was for breakers installed in the panel and not for receptacles installed in the wall. Is that, am I making a mistaken distinction there?
I can't do a final inspection on an electrical installation that a permit wasn't installed for. Because I don't know if the wiring
I
that's
understand- I
connected to it
understand
is
that.
in compliance.
I understand that, and I don't know if the breakers in the panel were being added, and so there was wiring associated with that, or whether they were replacing other breakers,
They
in
were-
which case the original wiring would be.
Replacing other breakers connecting to the wiring that was not inspected.
Okay. Okay, so that wasn't existing wiring, you're saying that the wiring was new?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. I was wondering if we could move on to the violation itself from the RICA, which speaks to the temporary wiring. So I'd like to, if that would be okay, to address some questioning with regards to the temporary wiring at the property, which is what was cited in the Board of Health violations number 2 by Rika Sterrett.
Do you want, you want this witness to talk to it, or do you want her to talk to it?
The witness.
Okay. All right, sir. When you went to the property, you noticed that there was a significant amount of outlet strips, cords, and the like. Is that temporary wiring?
No, it's permanently for all the cages and the equipment that's in the garage. So it's not temporary.
So it's not temporary. Is it permanent wiring?
It can't be described as permanent wiring because it's cord sets.
Right, but I guess as electrical inspector, you don't have any problems with outlet strips that are 15 or 20 outlets feeding numerous long electrical cords?
I certainly do, because
What's your problem with it?
Just because there's 20 or so receptacles there, you can possibly overload it by plugging in a multitude of heat lamps,
Do heat lamps draw a lot of electricity?
depending upon the wattage of the lamp.
Did you notice any of the wattages of the lamps there?
No,
So if they draw a lot of electricity on a long extension cord, will that heat the cord up?
certainly will.
Is that a fire hazard?
Yes, it is.
And if it goes through doorways and the like, or is used basically as permanent wiring, is that allowed?
No,
And you observed those large, long, multi-outlet strips, correct?
yes,
And you observed extension cords being plugged into each one of them?
not extension cords, but different pieces of equipment,
Okay.
be it UV lights, heat lamps.
And was that the same outlets that you weren't able to inspect the GFI breakers for, or the, what's it called, I've forgotten, I'm blanking on the name, but the arc fault breakers?
That cord set was plugged into a receptacle.
Okay. But you don't know what breaker it went to? Because you
No.
didn't really inspect?
I didn't inspect it.
So can you say, you can't sit here today and say that was safe, can you?
No, I can't.
I have nothing further.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Dina?
So how would you know if it were an appropriate power source for how would you know if it were safe? What would you need to do?
Need someone who is qualified to actually do the math and make sure that the wattage doesn't exceed the rating of the strip.
Okay. And is that considered electrical work that a homeowner could perform without a permit under the code?
It would best come from a qualified person who can quantify that the connected load to that strip is under its rating.
But is it allowed or not allowed?
The homeowner can do it.
So you don't need a permit or anybody to inspect to make sure that things like these multi-strips are not putting too much power to the breaker?
is that? Which one? This order.
This is the, yeah.
I'm sorry, can you repeat
So
the
that's
question?
considered, this is considered something a homeowner can do on their own without a permit or inspection?
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Dave, do you have questions around that specific?
I think you said this earlier, that that the equipment was plugged directly into the power strip and there weren't extension cords.
I didn't see any extension cords on that last photo.
Okay. I don't
Any other
think I have
questions?
any further questions.
Okay. I just had one question. So you said a qualified licensed electrician can go in to do the math to determine the load for each of the different outlet sets. What define what makes them a qualified licensed electrician that could do the math? Is that somebody like you that could go in and do that? Is that someone that's hired separately to go in and do that? Would that be done on a usual inspection? Can you just define that a little bit more? Because understanding you're a master's electrician, does that make you qualified to do that?
A qualified person is a licensed person, be it journeyman or masters. Everyone shared the same concern of all those outlet strips from day one to now, that, boy, there's a lot of things plugged into those strips. Is that a fire hazard? So my question is, have a qualified person determine the connected load, the loads that are plugged in it doesn't exceed the rating of that outlet strip. That's all.
Okay. So they would basically need to hire, you're saying that the homeowners, or somebody would need to go in there to do the math to determine the load. And that would be separate above and beyond this to determine.
Qualified person needs to perform it,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. That's all I have for questions.
I have a couple of questions. Can you explain to the board what a ground fault, a GFI, and a ground fault breaker is and their importance?
GFCI stands for Ground Fault Circuit Interrupter.
Yep.
And they're generally used for pools where you have the shock hazard, where you have water, you're standing on bare ground, and so if it protects the pool pump too, so if the pump starts leaking, electrically leaking, I'm speaking, that the GFCI protector, be it a circuit breaker or a receptacle, will trip so that there's no shock hazard.
So those are typically used in kitchens, bathrooms, correct? Anywhere where there's water?
Basements, garages, outside outlets.
All right. And when you went in and saw the garage, were they using water to water the I guess, do you call them lizards? What do you call them?
Do you want me to testify?
No, I'm asking you a question. What do you call what you have? Lizards?
They're reptiles.
Reptiles. The reptiles. Did you see water that was being used to feed, to water them?
I can't answer that.
Okay, all right. But if there was, was that what the GFI and the ground fault breakers were installed for in that area?
Because it's a garage.
Because it's a garage. Okay, okay. All right.
Any other questions by the board with regards to that? Okay.
No.
The board has no additional questions? All right.
It's your
Yep.
turn?
Yep. So we'll give you guys an opportunity to ask the electrical inspector questions. I will just ask that we limit it to what is on the Board of Health violations, and just to try to make sure that we keep it on topic. Okay?
Okay, so we don't have a microphone over here. I don't know if there's a.
There's one right on that shelf, if you don't mind going to that.
Just try and, oh, you want us to come to that microphone and testify?
Or how about you come up here?
Why don't, yeah, I guess that's probably best because we're going to be writing. Mr. Banfield, would it be
Yeah.
possible for you to stand up?
Sure.
Do you need a chair or anything like that?
No, I'm good, thanks.
Town council, do you wish for us to swear in, or is it still good from the last hearing?
I don't think you're going to be testifying. You're going to be asking questions.
We would eventually be testifying.
Did you testify the last time?
Yeah, but we didn't have an opportunity to have the input from the electrical inspector, so therefore we would need to give additional testimony
All right.
based on kind of the disputes of fact
Okay,
involved.
why don't you put your right hands in the air? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Yes.
So you're sworn.
Madam Chair, I would just ask that we be allowed to ask questions about this March 10th, 2022 order by the electrical inspector, because it has been entered as an exhibit.
Yep.
Okay.
That is
thank you.
fine.
So, Mr. Banfill, I would like to start by asking questions about that March 10th, 2022 order. I think that you have a copy of it.
Yes, I
Is that
do.
right? Okay. So you have 6 items listed here. On the first page, you refer to them as safe, I believe they're referred to as unsafe conditions. On the second page, you state the above noted violations and safety concerns. Just, can you clarify, are these 6 items, in your view, are these all violations of the state electrical code?
The first 5, yes.
So the first 5 are violations of the state electrical code and not the 6th?
Sorry.
I'm sorry, did you want me to repeat the question?
I don't see the 6th one.
It's your order. Do you have?
It's your order, the March 10th order.
I'm sorry. Not the 6th one, no.
That's what we're talking about.
But so 1 through 5,
Let me, I was looking at the wrong page, forgive
Okay.
me. I'll go over them. Four of them.
can you tell us which 4?
The electrical work, number 1, the electrical work was performed without electrical permits. Number 2, the sheet rock has not been removed to conduct an inspection. A qualified electrician shall confirm the connected load on each cord set does not exceed its rating. And the 4th one, although they've been installed, the ground fault and arc fault circuit breakers are installed, but they weren't tested.
Okay. So starting with number 1, electrical work performed without electrical permits, there isn't a citation with that one. Can you explain how that's a violation of the state electrical code?
Comes from the, if I may. It comes from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Division of Professional Licensure, and it's the Board of State Examiners of Electricians. And it, if I may, the following advisory was voted to be issued by the Board of State Examiners of Electricians. The board had voted to issue an advisory to remind inspectors of wires that all buildings and dwellings, electrical modifications that have completed without legally required permits and required inspections are not approvable. Inspectors of wires do not have the authority to issue a permit, override, or otherwise approve work that was done in violation of board rules and regulations. 237 CMR. Failure to do so may subject the inspector of wires electrical license to disciplinary action and up until including revocation.
Didn't you state, I'm sorry, I'll let you finish.
Then on the next page, from the board, another advisory. The board issued an advisory reminding inspectors, of their inability to approve unpermitted, uninspected electrical work. A question has been risen to whether or not, upon discovering such work, a property owner is required to fully remove and obtain approval of an inspector of wires. The answer to this question is not necessary. The board advises the owner of the property, proper course of action would be as follows. Obtain the services of a properly licensed electrician. Have that electrician review all previously unpermitted, uninspected electrical work. If said work is concealed, it must be uncovered or removed. Have that electrician pull a permit for this work. Have the electrician ensure that all work complies with the Massachusetts Electrical Code, and as the electrician is taking responsibility for that work. Have the electrician call for an inspection with the local inspector of wires, who can then inspect, and if done correctly, approve that work in the normal course.
So this outlines the process for obtaining a permit, but does it state that homeowners who have performed their own electrical work need to get a permit?
The homeowner you can do your own electrical work. You will not be issued a permit.
Okay. So, and that's allowed under the state electrical code?
I don't know if the word is allowed, but we live in America. You can do your own electrical work. You won't be issued a permit, and you won't get an inspection.
Is it a violation of the state electrical code for homeowners to do their own electrical work?
I can't answer that.
Okay, so the, number one here again states electrical work performed without electrical permits. If the homeowner performs that electrical work without an electrical permit, you're saying you cannot tell us if that is a violation of the state electrical code?
You will not be issued a permit, and you will not get an inspection.
That doesn't answer the question. Is it a violation of the state electrical code?
I can't answer that.
Well, you listed it on your report as a violation, which you just said, number 1, 2, 3, and 4 are violations of the state electrical code.
You won't get an inspection or a permit for work performed by the homeowner.
Well, I'm sorry, but you haven't answered the question.
I cannot answer your question.
Then can you explain why number 1 is listed that you, on your report, and you stated that it is a violation of the state electrical code? And there is no citation of the state electrical code with it.
The mere fact that you will not be issued a permit and you won't get an inspection.
Is that stated in the state electrical code, that that is not allowed?
I'm not certain of that.
So you are not aware of any particular citation in the state electrical code preventing homeowners from doing their own work without obtaining a permit?
Homeowners can perform their own electrical work. Yes. You won't be issued a permit and you won't get it inspected.
And when you say can I understand that means allowed under the laws of Massachusetts?
It's America, sir.
So it is allowed under the law?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. So number 2, sheetrock has not been removed to conduct an inspection, and you cite Rule 10, which is on the second page, and it states, electrical installations, repairs, maintenance, or removal shall not be concealed or covered from view until inspection by the inspector of wires within and not more than 24 hours for exterior or interior excavations, nor more than 72 hours for exterior or interior installations after proper notice to the inspector, Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays excluded. Do you recall having a conversation with me in 2019 about our electrical work in the garage?
Maybe. Go ahead. I don't recall.
Do you recall ever being notified of the electrical work that was performed in the garage?
Without having an electrical permit, I can't perform an inspection.
Do you recall being informed that the electrical work existed, that it was done?
You stated that you would be doing your own electrical work.
So you were informed of it? Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, I have some exhibits I'd like to enter just to expedite this. There are 3, they're related. Can I just hand them out at once together? Okay, so I have a few copies.
Thank you.
So these documents are, the first one is Building Department Emergency Report. It's dated July 3rd, 2019. The second, Building Department Emergency Report dated September 18th, 2019. And the third is Electrical Inspection Report, Oxford Building Department, inspected by Al Banfill, and the date is July 10th, 2019. On the document dated July 3rd, 2019, the second page states, please call Casey Fleming, and a phone number. He did some electrical work in his garage and would like to speak with you. So
I
you
recall that, yes.
Okay. So you stated that you were informed that the work was performed. I think you'd agree 2019 was more than 72 hours ago?
Yes.
Okay. So according to Rule 10, the work was uncovered, you were provided notice, and did you decline to perform an inspection at that time?
I can't perform an electrical inspection without an electrical permit.
Okay. But you were informed, and you stated at that time that you were not able to perform an electrical inspection.
There was no permit pulled for that work.
Did you state that you would not perform an inspection?
I could not, yes.
Okay. So violation number 2 states, sheetrock has not been removed to conduct an inspection, and you cite Rule 10. And is it true that Rule 10 specifically states that it is only required to be revealed for an inspection for 72 hours and no longer?
Objection. That's a determination of law. It speaks for itself.
Okay. I'll move on to number 3. A qualified electrician shall confirm that the connected load on each cord set / multi-outlet strip is not exceeding its rating. Can you explain why that is a violation of the state electrical code?
Here again, I mentioned before that although everyone commented about the outlet strips that you had in there, and it was asking me, boy, I wonder if it's overloaded. So have a qualified person do the breakdown on all the devices, be it heat lamp, UV lights plugged into that strip to confirm that the connected load on that strip is not exceeding its rating.
And when you say rating, just for clarification, are you referring to the UL listing for those devices? What is the rating provided in the UL listing?
I don't know what the rating of that strip is.
But when you say it not exceeding its rating, is that what you mean by rating?
That qualified person would note the rating of that outlet strip, and that would determine whether the connected load is exceeding that.
But would they find the allowable rating in the UL listing for the relevant device?
Sure, yes.
Okay. So, to your knowledge, are any of the devices exceeding that rating?
I can't answer that.
Can you clarify why you can't answer it?
I didn't, because there was no permit, I didn't do an inspection on it to see whether or not the outlets or the devices plugged into that outlet strip is exceeding its rating.
Well, just to clarify, I didn't ask if they are exceeding it. I just asked if you have any knowledge that they are exceeding their rating.
No, I do not.
Okay, thank you. Does the state electrical code require that a licensed electrician confirm that loads connected to multi-outlet strips are not exceeding that strip's rating?
A qualified person, yes. And a qualified person is a licensed electrician.
So the state electrical code requires that licensed electricians perform that work?
In an electrical installation, an electrician will make sure that whatever that the outlet is being used for, that it doesn't.
I'll rephrase the question. If a person purchases a multi-outlet strip at a store, is it a violation of the state electrical code for them to plug in that outlet strip and then plug electrical devices into the outlet strip without first having a licensed electrician verify that those loads plugged into the multi-outlet strip do not exceed its rating?
No.
Okay, thank you. Number 4, ground fault circuit interrupter and arc fault circuit interrupter circuit breakers are installed in the panel, but not tested during this site inspection. Therefore, I could not confirm receptacles are protected. Now, the part of the code that you have cited here, is that the part of the code that states that this type of circuit breaker is required in this location?
Yes.
Okay. And do you agree that we do have them? They are installed?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to skip number 5 for the moment, going to number 6. You stated the unpermitted panels have been labeled. This also doesn't have a citation with it. Can you explain how that is? I'm sorry, actually, you did say that was not a violation of the state electrical code. Number 5 states, the order to correct dated April 2nd, 2021 was ignored. Are there, and I have copies of that report, Madam Chair, if you would like that entered as an exhibit?
We have it as well.
Okay, oh, okay. Are there any, there are 5 violations stated on that report. Are any of those violations on the April 2nd, 2021 report also stated in the March 10th, 2022 report?
Can you repeat the question?
I'm sorry.
I lost my,
There are 5 violations stated on the 2021 report. Are any of those violations still listed as violations in the more recent report dated March 10th, 2022?
I don't know if he has the exhibit in front of him.
That one,
It's exhibit number 5.
the electrical one?
Yep, exhibit number
Yes.
5.
And I do have copies if you'd like me to give to the inspector. Okay.
thank you, Casey.
I apologize.
It's exhibit 5, right?
Yeah.
Did you need the
I'm
question?
sorry, did
repeated?
you want me to repeat?
Yes,
the
could you please? I'm sorry.
The April 2nd, 2021, I'll
Okay.
rephrase. These 2 reports, are there any violations that are the same violation that are listed in both of them? Did any violations from the 2021 report still exist and get listed in your March 10th, 2022 order?
Number one, you need someone to ensure that the luminaires providing the ultraviolet lights are properly grounded.
Did you,
And look,
I'm sorry, I'll let you finish.
looking closely at the outlet strip, it looked like there was only 2-wire cord sets plugged into it. Some of them, but here again, someone needs to ensure that it's being utilized properly.
So when you did your inspection on February 10th, 2022, did you note any UVB lights that were not grounded?
I wasn't performing an inspection, I was doing a walkthrough.
Okay.
Because there's no permits being pulled.
So when you did your inspection on February 10th, 2022, you were not reviewing the inspections from your April 2nd, 2021 report to see if they had been corrected?
No, I did not.
Can you tell us who asked you to perform the inspection on February 10th, 2022?
I don't think it's relevant.
Okay.
Is that an objection?
Yes, that's an objection.
Okay. Going back to the March 10th, 2022 order, can you state why you listed number 5, the order to correct dated April 2nd, 2021 was ignored, when you just stated that the inspection you did that resulted in this report, you were not performing a reinspection of those violations from the April 2nd, 2021 order?
Because there was no permit.
Can you explain, how was the order ignored if you were not doing a re-inspection of those violations.
There was no permit pulled. So I wasn't re-inspecting any violations without a permit.
But that doesn't answer how you made the determination that the April 2nd, 2021 order was ignored.
Because there was no permit pulled.
But didn't you state earlier that there was a permit pulled by a licensed electrician, Russ Powlin?
To provide the GFCI and AFCI in the panel, but not for the electrical work that's concealed.
Does the April 2nd, 2021 order list as a violation that work was performed without a permit?
I believe it does. I believe it says to provide services of a qualified licensed electrician to pull permits.
But you did say that a permit was pulled by a licensed electrician. Does it state in this April 2nd, 2021 report that the property is in violation of the state electrical code for having work done by the homeowners without an electrical permit?
I don't have it in front of me. Forgive me. This was in '21?
Yes, April 2nd,
forgive me, yeah.
2021.
It says all the work that needs to be done must be done with the necessary proper permits that
Does it-
must be applied for by a licensed electrician. And that would continue forth till right now.
Does,
That order to pull a permit hasn't been fulfilled.
But a permit
which
was
one-
pulled.
Let me finish.
Okay, can we, just because I'm looking at the interest of time and we're going around and around on one
Okay.
topic, okay? We've already been at questioning now for 30 minutes, and I would like to really focus on what we have in front of us from the Board of Health perspective, okay? So I believe that an appeal was placed for the electrical. So they can deal with the ins and outs of those. I would like to focus on, which you've already done some questioning, if this is okay, is focusing on the violation that was provided to you by Rika Stara Exhibit 3, March 2nd, which is the overload of the outlets. So if we
Okay.
can try to focus our questioning to the electrical inspector only on the temporary wiring, because that is indeed what us as the Board of Health will be deliberating on, which is that violation in particular. They will address all of these electrical violations during the appeal process for that.
Okay, we agree to that.
Thank you.
Then I would like to turn to that report, the March 2nd, 2022 report by the health inspector. Do you have a copy of that?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so number 2 on the second page, it says, in the garage and the basement, multiple extension,
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I just want to, do you have a?
in the garage and the basement, multiple extension cords and power strips were observed, continuing to overload the outlets. Temporary wiring was still run along the floor in the basement. The front entry room and the game room both had outlets that were missing covers. I think we've already discussed the overloaded outlets at length. Can you define for the board members, what is the definition of temporary wiring in the state electrical code?
Temporary wiring is wiring that will be used for less than 90 days. Other than that, it needs to be permanent wiring.
If a device has an outlet, if a device has a power cord that plugs into an outlet, is that temporary wiring? Or does it need to be hardwired to be temporary wiring?
Depends how long it's in use. If it's something that's going to be utilized for a long period of time, then permanent wiring needs to be installed.
When, when is something temporary wiring? So you said it has to be in use for, I'm sorry, did you say in use for more than 90 days?
Less than.
Less than, okay, but what are the characteristics of the temporary wiring? What makes it temporary wiring?
A good example is holiday lighting. That would be temporary. If you've got a fixed piece of equipment and you have it on an extension cord or a multi-outlet strip, then that's not temporary.
What makes it temporary? So if I purchase a floor lamp and I plug it into an outlet, is that temporary wiring?
Not if it's directly plugged into the receptacle.
If it's plugged into a multi-outlet strip, does that make it temporary wiring?
No?
Okay. Are extension cords considered temporary wiring?
Yes.
Did you observe any extension cords?
No, I did not.
Okay, thank you. Did you observe any wiring lying under a rug or other floor covering?
No.
Did you observe any wiring extending through a doorway or other opening in a structural element?
No.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions. Would you like to ask any questions?
Mr. Inspector Banfield, can you recall a time that you issued similar violations? And by similar violations, I mean, you issued an order to correct based on power strips and the loads that were plugged into them?
Objection, it's irrelevant.
All right, I actually don't believe I have any further questions. Thank you for your time.
Welcome. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Are you guys going to testify?
I would actually just like to ask counsel, I didn't catch your last name.
Blake, B-L-A-K-E.
Thank you. Is
First
Jeffrey
one's
Blake?
Jeffrey, yep.
All right, thank you. Did you want to testify? Okay, why don't you go ahead?
So in light of Mr. Banfield's testimony, a question was asked in the prior meeting by Board Member Dina Costa about what it would take to solve this amicably. I believe that was kind of the thrust of your question. And my feeling, my opinion, is that, you know, we got this order back in 2021. We addressed all the issues. My recollection, speaking to Mr. Banfield, was that we could all rewire the cords attached to the lights, because, you know, you don't get an electrical permit when you attach a power cord to something. That's not normally a thing. We spent a lot of money, you know, because initially there were ganged power strips. And so we spent a lot of money getting special power strips that had cords sufficiently long that we would no longer require an extension cord. And also having a sufficient number of receptacles so that nothing would ever have to be ganged again. And we, as I said before in the previous meeting, we hired an electrician to come in and replace the breakers, even though our interpretation was, as homeowners, we wouldn't actually have to pay an electrician to do that. But we did it anyway, because that's what the town asked for. During the time of these original violations was during COVID. Our understanding was that the town, on its website, specifically said that 110 safety inspections could be performed with photographs. We have photographs of all of the work, from the rough frame all the way up to where we are now. Additionally, the work was interrupted. So a substantial portion of the wiring can be observed right now. And so it's not really a mystery about whether or not, what's behind these walls. It can be observed, we have photos. And I understand that I appreciate Mr. Banfield's testimony. It's actually cleared some things up for me. In terms of why he won't perform the inspections, but it kind of makes it impossible for us to address these if we're not allowed to have an inspection of them. Casey mentioned at the last meeting that, I'm a laser technician, and, what he didn't say was that before I was an electrician, I was a nuclear electronics technician for 10 years. So the idea that I'm not qualified to calculate the loads, it was my job for 10 years. And so, if the town really wants that, if they really want somebody to go through the loads, I could do that. But that's not what's really being asked for. What's being asked for is for us to pay even more money to pay an electrician to do this, which, my personal experience is that when a contractor knows that you have a dispute with the town, they're not so interested in being involved in that because they have other jobs they have to think about. And I'd like to say that the electrician that we hired for the breakers, after he installed them and called the town hall to attempt to get an inspection and was refused, he's not interested in talking to us anymore either because he doesn't want to be in the middle of this. So to kind of not take any more of your valuable time, which we're very appreciative of, our goal looking at this is that, these inspections will be performed, not to close out the original orders, which Mr. Banfield admitted was not his objective. These inspections were ordered as part of a zoning proceeding. And that zoning proceeding has, a bench trial, or I'm sorry, not a bench trial, excuse me, a summary judgment scheduled for August of this year. And we as the homeowners would like to be allowed to pursue that since, the health inspector pointed out many times during her testimony and questioning that, well, this is in a commercial, this is commercial, but this is a residential area. And that's a zoning matter, and we're addressing that in court, which is the proper process for that. And we don't believe that, kind of, in our view, making nuisance health complaints, is really pertinent to that. And as far as the incompleted work, we pulled the permit because we wanted to follow the process, and could we have followed the process better? Absolutely. But it makes it kind of hard, as I stated previously, to do that when kind of the opening, for lack of a better term, gambit of the town is that we have to remove all our animals from the property, which is a zoning matter. And so I think Casey would probably agree that we would like, if the board doesn't feel that it can, dismiss these orders, at the very least, be willing to give us some more time to wait for this zoning matter to be addressed by summary judgment, so that then we have more of an opportunity to work out the other issues. I don't really believe that it's credible that these are imminent safety issues, because I would like to think that the safety inspectors of the town wouldn't spend a year waiting to look at imminent safety violations. I would expect that if they were imminent, they would be back immediately, and that hasn't occurred. And I think most homeowners or even tenants would agree that, the expectation that they kind of catalog the loads on their breakers, or not their breakers, excuse me, their power strips is kind of not normal. That's not something that most people have experienced in their life, and I think we would need a lot more electrical inspectors if that was the case. So I don't know that I have anything else to say on the matter. Madam Chair, do any of the board members wish to ask us anything further? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'll keep my comments brief, but as Robert stated, my understanding is that the inspections that occurred on February 10th, 2022 occurred because we have a zoning matter with the town in land court, and that my understanding is the judge in that case did not understand why these other orders had not had a reinspection and been closed out, because our position is that everything was corrected. And that the inspections that occurred that day were for the purpose of re-inspecting these old orders, and the wire inspector has stated that he didn't do that, that was not his understanding. And as Robert King stated, the justification that was provided on the first date for the health order largely was, this is a residential area. That makes this a zoning order. Basically the same zoning order that's already in land court. And the town, like everyone else, is required to follow the process that is set out by the courts in that proceeding. And count one is just contradictory to the building department. I'd like to add, actually, we've owned this house for only a few years. We've put about $80,000 into this house. When we bought it, the previous tenants, who had been renting it from the owners, I don't know the exact circumstances, but they had foster kids, it was some kind of a foster kid situation. We purchased the house and found it was heavily infested with bed bugs, which we exterminated and then put a lot of money into this house. But now we're the public nuisance. And I think that the only reason we have not received more masquerading as zoning orders from the town is the town has run out of departments to send them. We received orders from building, zoning, electrical, fire, health, animal control, all with the same consistent theme. So I think we've made our point, so I'll rest there.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
We talk about the zoning matter, and it's my understanding of that zoning matter that you were told you were running a commercial business in a residential area. Is that correct?
I think that because that is a matter in court, I don't feel comfortable commenting on those proceedings specifically.
But you
That's-
felt comfortable bringing it up here, but you don't want to talk
The
about it.
purpose of the inspections that day is the judge, my understanding is the judge felt that these orders should receive a reinspection and be
Zoning
closed
board-
out if they were no longer in violation, but I am not going to discuss the arguments that the attorneys are putting forward in court about those proceedings.
We are represented in that proceeding, so you probably want to contact our attorney for that.
I'm asking you, the ZBA order said that it was a commercial use in a residential area. And it's very, you want to say it's a zoning issue, it's a zoning issue. That is a zoning issue. But it's also an electrical issue, and it's also a housing
I
code issue.
object to this. We are
Yeah.
here to discuss this health order. We are not here to discuss an open court docket in land court.
Yeah, to the extent that it's other things, the chair wished for us not to take any more time getting into the other stuff. I mean, we could be here literally all day. asking Mr. Banfield
Alls I
questions.
wanted to know what the nature of the action was.
You,
That's all.
You
That's
were-
it. I'm
okay.
done with it once you tell me that, yeah, you appealed an order that the ZBA found that you were conducting a commercial use in a residential area. You say yes, that's the end of my questions.
we can't comment on the
I
use.
just don't think that we should
Yeah.
discuss it at all. My apologies, but it is, I don't think it's relevant.
All right, so I believe at this time, if there's no additional questions from the board members, we would like to just close, you have one question? Okay.
So, how many reptiles are you capable of having it? What would be the peak number of reptiles you could have?
I don't know that I could come up with an exact number.
How many do you have now?
I don't.
Just to, in the interest of expediting time, this was brought up in the ZBA hearings, and
I haven't read the hearings, or
I understand.
this is a question.
So this space is very fluid, we can move things around, that was kind of the original intent. Obviously, if we had, too many reptiles that we felt we couldn't care for them properly anymore, we would be in a situation where we
I'm
had
trying to get
to.
a picture in my head.
Oh,
Are
okay.
we talking maximum of 10? We're talking a maximum of 1,000?
It's less than 1,000. No,
We have a few hundred.
Hundreds?
Yeah, these are not large animals, if you're not familiar with them. You know, like the bearded dragon is gonna be 18 to 24, maybe 26 inches long, so.
Okay. But I mean,
Normal
you're
adult
running a
length.
business, you know how many animals you have, right?
Yes.
It's not at any given moment, you know, we don't like have like a inventory tracker that I keep
Okay.
in my head.
You can't say more than 100, less than 500?
We have
or
a few
Yeah.
hundred.
Yeah,
400, okay. All right, that's fine.
Any other questions with regards to the orders before we close out the public hearing? And the board will deliberate. No?
I have one question for Al.
Get them all in now before we close it.
The question after we close it.
Yeah.
Al, the ability for a homeowner to do their own wiring, that's an exemption for a homeowner who's using it for residential purposes?
Yes.
Does a business who owns the building have the same exemption as owners of the
No.
building?
No.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Could I respond to that?
Quickly?
No, I don't. All right.
If you would like it, I'm sorry I did not bring copies, but I have a July 22nd, 2006, similar determination by the Board of Electrical Examiners that says essentially, yes, in some circumstances, businesses do not require an electrical permit. Under the law, the work needs to be done by a licensed electrician and have an electrical permit when it is basically employment work done for hire. If you own the property and you are doing it yourself, you do not need an electrical permit and you do not need to be a licensed electrician. If you are paying someone else to do it, you need both of those things. Well, they need to be licensed and they need to get a permit.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? No? Dave, last call?
That's cool. No, thank you.
Good? All right. So, so we do a vote to close the public hearing?
Yeah, do a motion to close the public participation part of this hearing.
Yep. Okay, just want to make sure I'm doing it right. So I'll entertain a motion to close the public comment, public hearing portion of this public hearing for 59 Quabog Ave.
Dave Escobar, Vice Chair, I'll make the motion as stated.
Dina Costa, I second it.
Okay. Any discussion?
No.
No.
No. Roll call vote?
Dave Escobar, Vice Chair, yes.
Dina Costa, yes.
Carrie Singer, Chair, yes. Okay.
I don't know if you guys know what that means, is it's just basically, you can't talk anymore.
Yeah, no, we understand.
Okay.
We
All right, just
understand,
wanted to make
thank you.
sure. Yep.
All right, so with that portion being closed, so it's time and opportunity for the board to review these violations. So there are 4 in general that were noted on the March 2nd, 2022 order from Rika Starrett. So I'd like to, if the board is okay, just go violation by violation, have a brief discussion, and then we can vote on each violation separately, if that's okay with the rest of the board. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, so violation number 1, this is the front entryway, the wall adjacent to the garage door, small section of the wall is open. So there was lots of conversation from the public hearing, the initial part of it last week that we talked about, where there was a cease and desist order from building on this portion, which was why this was not closed up. And so at this point in time, I don't know how the rest of the board feels, is that we could grant an extension on this violation to allow building to do what they need to do, and then we can always revisit it in a month or more, depending on what the board feels is an appropriate time frame. And then we can revisit this violation. Dave, Dina, what are your thoughts on that violation?
Can we tie the extension to the action that put in place the cease and desist order? Because I don't think we can, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to have a requirement to fix something when
Right.
they're not allowed to do any work.
We could do that, but I think I think we want to stay on top of it from the board's perspective. So therefore, at least if we were to get an update, say, in a month, then we can always grant an additional extension then, depending on where it's at. I'm just, it's hard for us to uphold
Yeah,
this
I mean,
currently
that-
right now.
I think it's totally valid.
But I just don't want to lose track of it, which is why I'm thinking that we go a little bit shorter, revisit it, and then we can always extend from there. I don't want to let it go where we don't address it, just because, we've had some, issues with addressing those things in the past. So, thoughts?
So certainly, I mean, they can't correct it to be in line with the regulations for the Board of Health in the situation that they're in right now with the cease and desist that we discussed last meeting. So I think an extension is appropriate.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Okay, so I will entertain a motion to uphold the current violation number 1 on the March 2nd, 2022 order for, we'll uphold that for an additional month. We will revisit that violation in a month to gather additional information from building on the cease and desist. So, is that the right terminology for an upheld, or how do we?
I think that works.
Does that work? Okay.
I think that works.
Yep. And so we will revisit this violation in a month for an update.
Dave Escobar, Vice Chair, I'll make the motion as stated.
Dina Costa, member, second it?
Okay. Any additional discussion?
No.
No.
Nope. Roll call vote.
Yes. Dave Escobar.
Dina Costa, member, yes.
Terry Singer, chair, yes. Okay, violation number 1 addressed. Violation number 2. Violation number 2 is in relation to what we had discussion with today, which is the multiple extension cords and power strips observed, continuing to overload the outlets. So, open it up to the board for conversation with regards to this. We've heard lots of conversation, lots of testimony with regards to this. So, thoughts on this?
So what I'm hearing from the testimony from Mr. Banville today, it sounds like possibly there is not temporary wiring, which is one of the issues listed. And it also sounds like we could, or the electrical inspector could provide recommendations, but perhaps because the work was done by the homeowners, and at this point, we're making a determination on a residential living space that I'm not really sure about this one. So I also had a question for town council on exactly what, obviously there's another appeal going on. So
Yep.
from our perspective on this board, what should we be making a decision on?
You should be making an independent decision based on the evidence before you. However, if there is another board that had an order that is dispositive or helpful to you, their order is valid unless and until it's either stayed by a court or overturned by a court. So the fact that it may be appealed does not make that an invalid order. I will tell you that, obviously it could be overturned at some point or not, but you certainly could rely on it. And I don't know what you're really driving at, other than perhaps at the ZBA found this to be a commercial use.
Right.
And if it's a commercial use, permits are required.
Irrelevant,
But
yeah.
this really isn't whether or not a permit's required here, right?
Addressing the temporary wiring.
That's right, that's right.
Correct.
And I mean, we see pictures of how it is, so.
Yep. So I think based on the evidence that we have and the testimony, especially from, sorry, way too many papers all over the place here, from Mr. Banfill, that basically states a qualified licensed electrician can do the math to determine the load. So, I mean, I think that we don't have the math in front of us. We don't have the numbers in front of us to determine the load of the outlets that are there in the temporary wiring. So, you know, I think that we could request that a licensed electrician come in and do the math and provide the load, or we could, you know, uphold this until we have that specific information in front of us, since we don't have that currently. But I think the other piece to that is that even though Mr. Banfield did not see temporary wiring, Rika Sterrett did upon her inspections. And so that's what we have to go off of, is what our agent saw during her own inspections, which is that there was temporary wiring. So I think that's really what we're focusing on here, is the temporary wiring. It's hard to see from the images if the actual devices are plugged into the outlets or if it is off of a temporary wiring or an extension cord. You know, it's kind of hard to see that from those images, but going off of our professional who went in and did the inspection, she's seen the temporary wiring.
I'd just argue that we heard from our town's electrical inspector that what was described here isn't necessarily temporary wiring. It's just something to consider. And I mean, this is asking the homeowners to comply with all electrical regulations, do not use temporary wiring, and provide outlet covers. Those are the three issues.
So, from a corrective action standpoint, what would we be requiring? That the way to resolve this would be what, a reinspection where it's determined that what's in use at the time is not temporary wiring, and some statement or calculation that shows the strips are not being overloaded?
Yep. So I think based off of what we've received in terms of our exhibits and from our, what I like to call subject matter experts, that a qualified licensed electrician should come in to determine the load, one of which that is licensed and appropriately by our town. So they would have to choose a certified, however, what's the term that we use here in town?
License.
Licensed that, yeah, is approved by the town.
Do we approve electricians?
Do we approve electricians or no?
I think they're state licensed.
Yeah,
Okay, so then just a licensed electrician who would come in and do that. And that was, you know, the recommendation as well from the electrical inspector.
It was a recommendation to have it done, but I'm not sure it's necessarily falls under our purview. That similarly to like when we make recommendations on baseline water testing for a well, we can make that recommendation, but is this something that I'm just thinking about, you know, cost and things like that. We've heard some issues about getting a licensed electrician to come into the home. That's currently contested in several areas, and you know, them not wanting to come in and get involved, and I can understand that.
You know, and I think the other piece to this too is that with us not knowing the actual load by a licensed electrical contractor, it has the potential to create a fire hazard. I can't say that it is a fire hazard because we don't know what the loads are. So, you know, I can see images and I look at the images and I think from my opinion, it's overloaded. And that it's a fire safety, but I'm not the subject matter expert, right? So, but by listening to that, we're hearing that there's temporary wiring, that it is a fire hazard. And those are the things that I'm looking at from this perspective. And we know that their definition of temporary wiring, based on what Mr. Banfield said, is temporary wiring is less than 90-day use, and we know that this is not a less than 90-day use.
Which argues that this is not temporary wiring.
Correct.
Which is one of the violations.
Which argues that this is temporary wiring by definition, but they're not allowed to have it. So we're calling, this is based on RECA's inspection, this is temporary wiring, which means it should be a less than 90-day use, which we know for what is being conducted from the business is longer than 90 days. So it's not a temporary use.
So I did hear the homeowner say that there wasn't any extension cord use anymore, which would be considered temporary per Mr. Banfield's testimony.
So in order to really see that, there would have to be an additional inspection on that. So, I mean, we can make the recommendation, yes,
This one's, I'm sorry.
Just a couple of quick things.
yes,
Recommendation, this is your order. I would make it an order if I were you.
okay,
And secondly, and most importantly, just because there is a conflict between testimony doesn't mean you can't make a determination. That's your job. You are the fact finder. He could say it's black and he can say it's white, and you need to make a determination. You can't say, well, one guy says it's black, one guy says it's white. I don't know. It's for you to judge, or she, it's for you to judge the credibility of the witnesses.
okay. So I would, is there any additional discussion on this?
Just one last thing,
Yep.
sorry. This is asking that the homeowners follow all electrical wiring standards, and it talks later about usage of electricity and just to make a point, I'm not saying that this is my decision, but those other things that are outstanding almost prohibit them at this point from following this. So I would recommend an extension on this one if we decide that we're going to uphold it.
So if, hearing what you're saying, what are we waiting on? So if we were to grant an extension, what are we waiting on? What's the actionable item that we would be looking for from the board's perspective?
So this,
I guess that's the reason why, like, I don't want to grant an extension unless we have an actionable item
Gotcha, yeah.
to actually fall through.
Well, it doesn't have anything to do with our decision, but there is an outstanding appeal to the electrical violations. And so you can't complete this, you can't rectify this order. I see that it might put the homeowners in a bind.
Well, the appeal is on the electrical inspector's
Correct.
order, and the electrical inspector's order does not talk about the temporary wiring or the overloaded circuits.
It does talk about potential of overloaded circuits.
It does?
Yes.
I don't see that in my
So
copy.
that
maybe
is-
I didn't get the full copy.
Yeah, all my exhibits got out of order. Oh, here it is. So,
I don't think at this point, frankly, you're asking them to do anything other than simply provide you with a calculation.
correct, yeah. So it's a qualified licensed electrician shall confirm that the connected load on each cord set or multi-set is not exceeding its rating. And that was based on Exhibit 6, which was the March 10th order. So I think, to your point, Dina, the actionable item here would be to have a licensed electrician to come in and do a calculated load on those outlet strips to ensure that they are not overloaded. So that is definitely something that we can,
And a reinspection for the absence of temporary wiring. Right. So it's two separate issues.
I don't know that that's definitely in our purview. I mean, we can recommend it, but I don't know that that's something that we can require a homeowner to do, or should require a homeowner to do. I mean, it's recommended, it's clearly labeled on the, whatever cords they're using, that they should look at it. Just not clear that that's our,
I think
I think we transition from homeowners or homeowner residential purposes to commercial purposes.
also not our
So-
purview, right?
right, but we are voting.
Health and safety is.
On
all-
we need
residential
to
right now.
address is residential,
Residential,
because
right
that's
now,
what, I mean, yes, it's in zoning based on what we heard last week, they are running a business out of their house. It was stated, that they are running a business out of their house. So we have that, verbally. So I think to address this, the temporary wiring, the extension cords and the power strips that were continuing to overload the outlets. So I would, to your point, I think we need to figure out what that load is. And stated by a licensed electrician, then we need to get that number from a licensed electrical contractor. So that would be the, to extend it and have an actionable item.
Okay, so just going on, based on what number 2 says, so if we go, kind of by line, this says comply with all electrical regulations as the first issue, but you're saying what you're really asking the homeowners to do is to hire a licensed electrician and calculate the load on the outlets to the breaker. I just think from everything that I've heard over the last 2 hearings, there has been so much confusion over the past couple of years. I just want to be really clear about
I know.
what specifically we're going to ask them to do. 'Cause
Right.
I don't want there to be any ambiguity, and I don't
Agreed.
want
I-
to
Agreed.
I
make
do-
it too difficult also on the homeowners.
Do take the point that, are we gonna ask all, if we're talking about just residential, or we're gonna ask residential homeowners to prove that their power strips are not overloaded?
Go ahead.
I'm happy to weigh in on this.
Yes, please. Thanks.
There are sanitary code, electrical code, building code. And just because it's a code doesn't mean that we all have a power strip plugged in that's got 10 things into it, and we're in violation of the code. We are. The issue becomes when an inspector has to go in, they find the violation.
Right.
It's just because all of us up here are in violation doesn't mean that it's okay for them, so it's a violation, and there are 3 separate things here. In the garage and basement, multiple extension cords and power strips were observed, continuing to overload the outlets. So I understand you to be saying that you want them to provide you with the calculations that these things are sufficient to handle the load. The next one is temporary wiring was still run under the floor in the basement. That's easy. Go out and inspect, and if there's not an extension cord running underneath there, then check. And then finally, comply with all electrical regulations. Do not use temporary wiring and provide outlet covers. Well, outlet covers, I don't believe that I mean, I might be wrong, but I can't imagine anybody would appeal to the electrical board that they don't need outlet covers. I mean, those are kind of no-brainers. And to comply with the electrical code. Just because you're a homeowner, and again, I'm not going to concede here for our purposes They can do this on their own. It's a commercial business, and they can't do electrical for a commercial business. But even if they were, they have to comply with the electrical code. The electrical code doesn't say, the homeowner's exception is, you do whatever you want, and if it burns down, sorry. It's still compliance. So I think that you can issue an order here that requires compliance, and you won't run afoul of their appeal.
Okay. So, because there's actually a couple of different areas in here, do we vote on, would we vote
We
on
vote on it as a whole.
as a whole?
Yeah, I think so. And I think,
I guess that's where I'm
to
just,
Mr. Blake's point, a violation occurred, and this is our, I think we agree that Rika witnessed a violation, and that they've probably been corrected at this point. But I think we vote on the order on that,
Okay.
on that basis.
all right. So, all right. All right, so let me just figure out how to word this.
So we want a reinspection and
Yeah.
I'm just not 100% sure before you put this out, that
That's okay.
I would agree that hiring an electrician to calculate the load on a power strip is either, from what I understand from Al, part of the electrician, like the code for the town or the state, or for us, but
Okay.
that's just my interpretation.
All right.
I thought it was a
And that's-
recommendation, so that's what I heard.
Well, I think now we're trying to define what needs to be done to
Yeah.
clear the violation.
Yep.
So I think,
Okay.
it's not something that we enforce,
All right. So, let me just make sure I can word this correctly. So I will entertain a motion to uphold violation number 2. In the garage and basement, multiple extension cords and power strips were observed, continuing to overload the outlets. Temporary wiring was still run along the floor in the basement. The front entry room and game room both had outlets that were missing covers. So we'll uphold this, this current violation until a reinspection is done on the property to ensure that temporary wiring that was found on the original inspection on March 2nd have since been removed, and that we receive information from an approved licensed electrical contractor on the load amount for the power strips that are located on the property. In addition to an inspection to ensure that the missing outlet covers have been applied.
Dave Escobar, Vice Chair, I make the motion as stated.
I second it, Dina Costa, member.
Okay. Any additional discussion?
No.
Yes, I don't agree with the request to have an electrician
Okay.
calculate the load.
All right, so
Would
we
we
can
accept-
vote and we can go from there. All right, so we'll do a roll call vote. Dave?
So I'm going to vote no.
Dina
Yes, we have to-
Costa,
Can you make
think-
sure that that's a,
We want to, I think, well, what I'd
So
like to
you-
do is.
we need to vote or there's a
have more
continuous discussion?
I'd
So
like to-
that, we don't want to vote if there's still discussion. I asked
All
if there
right.
was discussion.
So I think, can we go back to the discussion portion at this point?
Mm-hmm.
Let me just ask, if we vote down this motion, can we make a second motion?
Yeah, of course you can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Or you could amend the motion.
okay. So I would,
Dave can amend the motion, correct?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
okay. So I'd like to amend the motion, amend the motion to say that the calculation of the loads on the power strip can be done by a qualified person that is not necessarily an electrician. Is that acceptable to you, Dina?
I think it's just a recommendation. I don't interpret that to, I don't think that there's any actionable item that we could ask the homeowners to provide to us to be in compliance with that request.
The concern is that there's an overload. If
I
they
know
can
what the concern is.
demonstrate that there isn't, we give them that opportunity to demonstrate that there isn't. And that's a simple calculation.
Well, and
Seems like-
based on our electrical inspector, when asked who a licensed contractor or electrician is who can do that, he said that it had to be a licensed electrical contractor,
Okay.
not someone who's qualified. That's a very broad term. We would need somebody who is licensed to do that.
But this isn't, I mean, I know this is not a very complex calculation, and I think an engineer or someone with the right education would be qualified.
So how do we determine right education and right?
I think they'd
So
have to
I could go in and say,
think-
I can do it.
Right, I think we would have to accept the person submitting it as qualified. And they could demonstrate that in different ways, their education.
I'd recommend just amending the motion to include the general statement of complying with all electrical regulations, not using temporary wiring, and provide outlet covers as evidenced by a reinspection on those 3 points.
And not address the concern for an overload.
Okay, so amend it without the load, but just upholding as written.
Right, I think as the Board of Health, we're gonna recommend that everybody follow the electrical guidelines, the building guidelines, the fire guidelines, but we won't necessarily be going in to do that. I mean, Rika will do her general walkthrough, and that should suffice if everything is back in line.
Right.
Okay. So amend the motion to eliminate the requirement for the calculation of overload on the power strips.
Okay.
Okay?
All right,
I second it. Dina Costa, member?
so any additional discussion?
No.
No.
Okay, so then, do I have to just do a roll call vote at this point? Are we clear on what the actual
Well, I
order
think
is?
you're voting to amend it. So you do a vote to amend and then the amended motion, sorry.
All right. No, I just wanna make sure, I kinda got confused on where we were at here with that. Okay, so, I will, entertain a motion to, for the amended order, as Vice Chair Dave Escobar, stated to remove the requirement for the calculation of the, electrical load.
I'll make the motion as stated. Dave Escobar, Vice Chair.
Dina Costa, member, I second it.
Okay. I will, and no additional discussion?
No.
Okay, then I do a call for a roll call vote.
Yes.
Dina Costa, member, yes?
Carrie Singer, Carrie Singer, Chair, yes. And then we do the official.
Yeah, vote as, the motion as amended.
Okay, so I will entertain a motion. I will entertain a motion to,
I think it's just a roll call vote on the amended motion.
oh, it's
right?
just the roll call vote because we already have the motion, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, so just a roll call vote.
Dave Escobar, Vice Chair, yes.
Dina Costa, member, yes?
Carrie Singer, Chair, yes. Okay. That's number 2. Number 3, I believe that number 3 has already been addressed, so do we need to vote on this, or are we in satisfaction with the image that we saw at the last week's hearing? That the egress has
yes.
been cleared? Okay.
This was corrected.
All right, so that was corrected. All right, number 4. Number 4 is the nuisance complaint. This is an odor was still being observed in the dwelling, and a large number of insects and reptiles were still kept in the garage of a residential neighborhood. 2 bins of crickets were observed without covers. Maintain the residential home in a clean and sanitary manner, referencing Mass General Law, Chapter 111, Section 122. Okay, so the board's discussion on this?
I think there's a lot of concerns with commercial breeding of reptiles in a residential setting, not just, well, the order here speaks to the nuisance of the odor. But I think there are many additional concerns. So
Okay.
think,
I've actually done some research over the last week or so myself with regards to breeding of bearded dragons in general, crickets, and the roaches that they have on the property. And so some of the things that I found was really interesting was that from the CDC, since 2020, there's actually been 3 open investigations from the CDC for salmonella outbreaks that were linked to pet bearded dragons. And where the numbers seem really small in terms of the general population of this country, it is still a cause for concern. So for instance, October of 2020, there were 13, 7 of which were hospitalized. There were no common supplier identified at the time during the investigation. There was another one in November of 2020, 18 cases linking salmonella from the bearded dragon droppings. And then there is an ongoing investigation that I did discover from January 11th of 2022 right now, where there was a total of 44. 15 people have been hospitalized. Average age is 27. And that's going off of what has actually been reported versus the lack of reporting of that. So we know that 44 is the smaller number, but could be higher. My concern here is the fact that, yes, we have those numbers and outbreaks that are being addressed by the CDC based on pet bearded dragons. We're talking about a few hundred, as stated by the owners of the property that are there. And my concern for the few hundred is we multiply that, and that could also cause a salmonella outbreak. There's also a lot of other things that I have done some research on in terms of the salmonella being in the droppings of the bearded dragon itself. Because we know that they are, and they have admitted that they are running a business, a commercial property in a residential area. We don't have the logistics in terms of how they are keeping a safe, clean environment and not spreading salmonella outside of that dwelling. And so how are they disposing of bearded dragon feces? Are they going in the trash? Are they dumping it out back? I don't know. None of those things are properly documented because we don't have it right now licensed or in town as a business. It is residential. And so my concern is that these droppings or cleaning of the cages or whatever, or tanks that are being done, are getting put out in their backyard. We don't know that. These are the things that we don't know that could then go into the ground, into the water, that could affect the abutters. And the definition of nuisance is vague, and it's very broad, and it uses the term may affect public health and safety, and not only for public health and safety, but for the owners of the property as well. In addition, you have ticks and mites that come along with owning even just one bearded dragon, never mind a few hundred. And so in doing that, I have some concerns about public health and safety, not to mention on top of the odor, the potential for fire hazards and things like that in that neighborhood. So those are things that I've done some research on over the last week, trying to determine a nuisance. In addition to, crickets and roaches that are there. And one of the things that I was reading about was, on average, how many crickets are fed to one bearded dragon, and the numbers are astronomical. It could be, up to 500 crickets. So if you have a few hundred bearded dragons, you multiply each one by however many crickets you need. That's a lot of crickets that are found within that household. So those are some concerns that I would like to just kind of open up to the board as well.
Certainly salmonella with reptiles. All reptiles carry salmonella, so good hand washing practices can mitigate that risk. And in terms of what was specifically outlined in Rika's violations were some open bins, right? I think that the animals is a good idea, in any case, but this is tricky again, because like you said, it's not pets, it's, they're, you know, commodity, they're being sold, and it's a business, so it's difficult. Where would the board sit if this were a business that, so I'm thinking like Pet Supply Plus has lots of animals, and do we have any?
I think they would have the scrutiny of running a business and being
Yeah.
a registered business, and
Agreed.
they would have health codes appropriate to that they would have to follow.
And those are
They
state,
would have inspections.
not necessarily
Oh, I
the
don't think we
Board
have
of
any
Health.
town regulations for pet stores.
I don't believe so, that's under commercial, so, yeah. Yep.
But they would have procedures, I would expect they would have
Agreed.
procedures for handling feces and dead animals.
Well, and I think that's the thing,
Things
we
like
don't
that.
have procedures, right? And so it's the unknowns of what is happening to animals that are deceased. Are they going in the trash? Are they, those are the things that I'm not sure, because we don't have the procedures outlined.
And even when it comes to shipping the animals, or I don't know how the animals are delivered, but we may be exposing mail carriers or shipping companies to whatever,
Agreed.
you know,
Yeah.
without procedures in place and inspections to show compliance, it's
Okay. All right. Any other?
Wild West.
Let's assume that this is deemed that it's not falling under a commercial zoning. I don't know that that makes really a difference, but so a business is a business, and they've admitted that they're running a business, and it's a large volume of animals, so that piece, I guess, really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So what would the board want the homeowners to do to give us their regulations? How do they deal with feces? How do they deal with dead animals? How are they shipping?
But without us having, it's not, right now, it's, we know that they're doing it and it's commercial, but it's residential. In residential, you cannot have a few hundred bearded dragons, just like, you know, if you have, you need permitting for, correct me, you know, for chickens, for, you can only have so many dogs and so many cats. We're talking a few hundred bearded dragons. So if we're going off of a residential, you know, because we don't, it is not licensed as a business right now. We know that they're performing a business outside of their house. But going off of that, that's the piece that we're focusing on, so. Okay,
So, but the specific, the order here is to essentially maintain the residence in a clean and sanitary manner?
Mhm.
That's,
it's very vague. Mhm.
that's,
Rika had said that, you know, regarding the odor, it was in the doorway of the entrance of the home and not outside of the home, from what I remember. So this refers to odor and no covers. What specifically would the board want the homeowners to do to correct this? What's the action?
So I think it's exactly what Rika put, maintain the residential home in a clean and sanitary manner. So they need to address odor, they need to, so whatever that is, based on the research that I've also done, is that bearded dragons and reptiles essentially have an odor. And so however they need to do that to accomplish it, I think that's the board, we need to address it as they need to keep it in a clean and sanitary manner.
Very vague.
It is very vague. Nuisance is very broad, right? So,
So essentially, Rika would re-inspect and decide if she noted an odor?
and ensure that it is clean and sanitary.
And then the bins.
And the bins are covered, correct. Yep. Okay. All right, so I will entertain a motion to upheld the violation order number 4 for the nuisance.
I'll make the motion as stated. Dave Escobar, Vice Chair.
I second it.
Any additional discussion?
Yes. I don't agree that an odor in the home would mean that the home isn't in a clean and sanitary manner. I don't know how we can amend this. I definitely agree with covering the buckets. And I would ask for some outline from these business owners as to how they're protecting the health and safety of this town and themselves.
So I think we're talking residential and not commercial, so therefore, if they were commercial, we could ask them to outline the safety on how they're protecting others. Yep,
I think you can do that pursuant to this order.
we can.
I absolutely do. Absolutely. I mean, the nuisance is having between 1 and 500 bearded dragons
Correct.
and the associated crickets,
Okay.
smell, possible disease. So I think you can absolutely order them to provide you with a plan as to how they treat, handle, and the like. And I certainly think your health agent can go in and inspect.
Okay, all right. So, I will, yeah,
Is that realistic, though? I mean, if this were a pet shop, a registered pet shop, they would have procedures for handling and cleanliness and shipping that they could be inspected to. But since this business is kind of flying under the radar, it's not registered, I mean, how do we ensure compliance, even if we do get procedures
Under the
from them?
nuisance, you have the ability to order abatement of that nuisance. And you have broad discretion. Your discretion could be get all but 2 of them out of there, or what you guys are doing now, you're trying to work with them. This is what we want to see. We want to see, procedures for cover. We want to find out, how you are preventing the spread of salmonella, how you ship. I mean, all of that, I think, is absolutely within your purview to order a written documentation and plan, and then, to inspect periodically. I don't know when the ZBA matter will be worm its way through the courts, but ultimately, if it's found to be a commercial business, I suspect the other board, the ZBA, is going to shut them down. Or, I shouldn't say it quite like that, that they can't operate a business in the residential, so they'll have to probably get something in a commercial zone or retail zone or the like.
I mean, things that I care about, hand washing, and they touched on this in our last hearing, how you keep them in the cages, how you protect it from the rest of the house. If anything were to happen where they were to escape or get out, we'd want to know. I mean, odor, I'm thinking like airflow and things like that. I mean, we care about health and safety, right? So this isn't a garage type setting. It's not in where they're sleeping and eating. So in an effort to work with them in this residential situation, I would say an outline of those things, addressing how you're not affecting the health and safety of other people and yourselves.
I think, though, that the odor was inside the home as well. It wasn't confined to the garage.
The animals are in the garage.
Right, but the odor is not.
Yeah, so things like airflow, and I'm not sure exactly what they
So-
do to mitigate that, but something to bring them back in compliance with this if they can. Again, very vague.
It's very
Yeah,
vague,
it's very
and
vague.
nuisance is very broad, right? So,
And I will just bring up that in the last hearing, we did hear that the only complaint that the Board of Health has received was from a contractor. It wasn't from a neighbor, it wasn't from a delivery person, it wasn't from anybody except someone who's doing work in the home.
well, and I think the other thing we need to bear in mind is that Rika is our agent. Rika went into the property. Rika inspected the property, and we have to go off of her. We have to go off of her, what she saw. we weren't there, we didn't know, so we have to go off of what Rika saw. And, you know, we have to trust that she felt that there is a potential for a public health and safety, a risk to themselves and to the public. And so I think that it's important for us to understand that and will an outline of what they're doing to maintain health and safety and how they're disposing of feces, will that help the odor? Will that help the actual nuisance itself? We're talking
I mean-
a few hundred bearded dragons.
Yeah, I mean, a plan is one thing, and a single inspection is another, but most programs, most quality programs have regular inspections. So unless we're willing to do that, I don't see how clearing this issue by asking them to come up with procedures is gonna be effective.
So how do they fix it? What do you want them to do?
So I think either way,
I would
and as
say-
we say, it's vague. Maintain the residential home in a clean and sanitary manner. So however they do that, when Rika goes back in for reinspection to clear this, she will determine if it's clean and sanitary.
I think the concerns that I've heard is, and it's in here, the large number of crickets and
Yep.
dragons. So maintaining it in a clean and sanitary manner might help that, but the lizards, the reptiles themselves may have issues that, I mean, they could be clean and sanitary, but they have issues. So that's why I think that requiring them to provide you with a program, if that's a better word, and allowing for regular inspections to make sure that program is being followed. I think that's a reasonable that's reasonable to abate a nuisance. You've got a lot of discretion in that, and I frankly think that that's very equitable. Like I said, I think you could do the death penalty, but you don't want to,
Right.
so.
Well, and I think the other piece too is that this is also ongoing in the courts in terms of ZBA. So this could definitely be turned around in a few months, whenever that may be. So, you know, I think understanding that piece of it too. Okay.
So,
Would you like to amend the motion?
no,
Okay.
we're still in the discussion phase, right?
Okay.
Yes, I agree that regular inspections, like any quality program, you have to have regular inspections to maintain compliance. That's a basic principle of any quality program. But now so now the town is taking on the responsibility of monitoring this business in order to provide, I'm not sure why we would want to do that. I mean, my feeling is that if the complaint is, so I do take your point, what is it that we want them to do? I agree 100%. I do take your point that the lizards have an odor associated with them, even if they're clean and healthy. But I would say eliminating the odor from the home, keeping the odor in the garage, I guess that would be, if we had to draw a line in the sand. I don't think it's reasonable for the town and the Board of Health to take on the responsibility for maintaining this business and checking their quality. I mean, I think we have a violation. We want to respond to that. We do have the more we learned about it, the more the concerns we have about, commercial breeding of these animals in a residential setting, and I think, but those are not the concerns that are specifically addressed in the complaint, so.
And you're absolutely right, Dave. And in terms of, Rika, now how often is she gonna go out and re-inspect based on procedures that they supply for us?
You could require them to provide you with a program in 2 weeks and come back here
Okay,
and review that program to determine whether or not you feel as though it's sufficient. You can do that.
Yeah, but if we do that, who's gonna do the inspections? Are we gonna,
Your health agent.
Yeah. but are we gonna, so,
She's going back anyway, probably for number one, right?
I know, but,
Eventually.
but now we're their partners in the business and helping them maintain this in the residential area to eliminate the issue of the nuisance. And, you know, considering all the other issues, I'm not sure that we should be doing that. Is that, I mean, tell me if I'm
listen,
wrong.
Yep, so this
that's
is
a
up to the
policy
board.
decision for
I
you.
mean,
I'm just
if-
trying to,
No,
If there were an
agreed.
outside, if there were a
Yep.
third-party inspection, and we could say, you know, contract an inspector and.
Yeah, you could- I think you
and
could do
turn in-
that.
Turn in your inspection reports,
I think you could do that.
and you'll be clean with us, that's fine. I don't wanna put the town on the hook for providing this quality inspection service to this business.
I think
Are
you could do
you,
that.
are you okay with that?
I definitely see what you're saying, yeah. You don't want to own it like indefinitely, right? But
But I
it might be
mean,
a good,
We could say, get a third-party inspector and have them.
But I think the other thing we need to think about
Provide.
too is if we allow this and we say they have a third-party inspector come in, they do the work, it comes away from, we're now setting a precedence to state that anybody in Oxford can breed bearded dragons.
That's true, I agree.
And is that okay?
We're-
Are we okay with that? Are we okay with the risk of an outbreak of salmonella if we have multiple residences breeding bearded dragons, hundreds of bearded dragons?
I agree 100%, that's
So,
why.
so that's my concern. That's my concern. Like,
It's not really our position to
But it
to
is.
support this business. It's
It's-
our position to take care of this.
to
this
protect
violation.
the public health and
Yeah.
safety, correct. And that's what I'm looking at. And it, you know, there's CDC has it well documented on their website that there are outbreaks related to it.
when they talk about outbreaks, salmonella is spread from the vector, so the reptile, to the person orally. So you touch the reptile, you touch your mouth, you touch your food, you get salmonella. The two people who live in this house can't then go to work and give salmonella to somebody else. So the outbreaks are when somebody goes to a pet store, they pick up a lizard, and then the next person goes in and picks up a lizard, and this salmonella process happens from one vector.
But again, we don't know who else is visiting the house.
Nope.
We don't know who else is going into the house.
I don't know that it's
So-
our job to know that. I mean,
But
that,
it
that could
is.
happen with one lizard, right? That could happen with one pet or 10 pets, and where do you draw the line? And yes, this is definitely a question of, is this a business? Is this zoned properly? Does it belong in their garage? But that's not the Board of Health. That's not what we're being asked. We're being asked, does this affect anybody's health and safety? And I don't know that having an odor in your house affects your health or safety. I'm not connecting the dots there. And I don't see the clear road other than one of you saying that you want all of these animals removed to correcting this specifically.
Well, I don't think that we're asking them to maintain it in a clean and sanitary manner. It doesn't say that we have to ask them to remove them. If they can put in an air filtration system or something to that effect, and Rika goes in and she finds that, and she finds that it is acceptable, then that's okay. Like, she has to come back and present that to the board.
Yeah.
It doesn't state here that they have to be removed.
Right, no, yeah, I was saying like, maybe
Right.
that's like one of the options, right?
Correct.
That's why I suggest, if you're going that route, as I've said before, I think you could go the route that I think you want to go. But if you're going to go that route, you can ask them to provide you with after he's heard the discussion, a plan. And then you can look at that plan to determine whether or not it's sufficient in your minds to abate the nuisance that you have here. I would also strongly suggest that any motion says, to the extent that it's allowed by zoning, right?
Okay.
Because you aren't going to be justifying, condoning a business in a residential district. That could go away soon. And I think the issue there would be whether or not it's an accessory use to a dwelling, and I don't think, well, I'll save my opinion on that. But certainly, you know, you have a whole host of the ability. I think that just saying, maintain it in a clean and sanitary manner is a tough one.
It's very
You
tough.
don't know anything about the care and feeding of bearded dragons. He does.
Mm-hmm.
And he should know industry standards, and he can provide you with his proposed plan, and then you can certainly take it from there and heap it on. For example, a licensed, I don't know if there is such a thing as a licensed bearded dragon inspector. Obviously, it's not gonna be a bearded dragon
Probably
inspector,
not.
but you know what I'm saying, a third party. But this is, I just say this it's a policy decision for you, but these are all the things that you
Right.
can do.
Right. Okay. All right.
What are you thinking, Carrie?
I have very grave concerns with protecting the public health and safety. Again, we don't have the program, and we could certainly uphold this and ask for, you know, a program outline.
Yeah.
But is that, again, how are we going to ensure that the outline is being followed? And then that's gonna be our agent.
Well, it's more
going in.
objective, right? So it's very subjective if someone goes in, and I know you would never try to be subjective, but it sort of is, right? What some person might feel comfortable and clean and sanitary might not, and, I mean, Rika will be re-inspecting, so she'll be comparing one thing to the other. I don't know.
It's hard because even in hoarding cases, it's
Yeah.
their own house,
Right.
but it's still a potential for them to have a risk for themselves
Yep.
and for others. You don't know what's behind someone's front door,
course.
but a hoarding case is a nuisance. So it's, you know, some people, you know, you hate to say it, but some people, you know, they hoard lots of stuff. I mean, I don't want to say that this is equivalent to that, but
It's
we're-
just as subjective,
it's
though.
just
Yeah,
as
yeah.
subjective. And so that's what I'm looking at. It's that protection of the public health and safety.
I mean, we could certainly, so Rika kind of saw this in person. I mean, we have like these 3 pictures, and she, you know, outlined what she saw. And we could certainly just kind of put it back in her court and say, you know, could you look at it again with these issues corrected and see if it would meet afterward?
Yeah, so I think, you know, I think if maintaining the resident's home in a clean and sanitary manner, if they provide us with a program, that's fine. But I don't want to mandate that and say that we are requiring it, because then when we have to follow up on that, right? And then that's taking away town resources. So I think that, you know, once it's determined that we vote whether to uphold this or not, the owners of the property will do as they see fit to maintain it in a clean and sanitary manner. And when they feel that it is, Rika will go do a reinspection, and then we move on from there. And so
Don't we owe the owners a target to shoot at, some kind of clear direction as to what would be acceptable?
Again,
I mean,
it's-
Well, she gave a testimony of specifically what
she saw.
And like Carrie said, she's the expert in kind of applying this to the regulations. And so, I mean, they could use that for sure in trying to meet compliance.
Okay. Any other discussion before I?
So what we're saying is that they would have a reinspection and reinspection until they satisfied, until Rika thought it was
That would be correct.
substantially
Yep. So
improved.
basically, if we were to vote, let's say we were to vote to uphold this, they would then need to correct it, and then they would need to contact the Board of Health to do a reinspection on that said violation. And then Rika would go back out, she would do her reinspection, and then we take it whatever next step it goes down.
I will say that when we vote, I don't know that an odor necessarily, in the home, I mean, outside of the home is a different story, right? If there's an odor and the neighbors are complaining, then it's a public nuisance, in my opinion, the way that I interpret it. But when you do put this forward, I mean, I don't know necessarily that an odor in the home is something that we have to make an opinion on.
So actually, there are private nuisances as well, and so I believe that this would fall underneath a private nuisance.
Well, private nuisance. would be
Private, but could
between-
also be public in terms
Yeah.
of, yep.
Say again?
So it would essentially be both. So it's private in the sense where it's happening in their house. They are living in the odor and putting themselves at risk, but it also has the potential to be that public nuisance where the salmonella we don't know how they're disposing of the, any deceased reptiles or feces or any of the materials that they're using to clean the cages. That's correct.
So
Yeah, well, a
is it the
private
case,
nuisance is between two private parties.
Okay.
So what you described is a public nuisance.
Yep, okay.
but we're not required to wait until the neighbors are calling saying that they're.
Correct.
we're
You're
aware-
not
We're
required-
aware of the potential for,
For the firefighter to go in the hoarding situation and
Yeah.
die before you do something.
Yeah.
Correct,
That's correct.
yep.
okay.
So we don't need complaints in a hoarding situation to address it as a nuisance. It's just could be, 911 is called because she doesn't contact and they go in and they find a hoarding situation. So again, very similar. Okay, any additional conversation?
No, just so, yeah, so we can take action for the potential
Yep.
as well.
Correct, it's a may, it's that word may, yep. All right, so,
I don't have anything more.
okay. And then we will, okay, so I will entertain a motion to upheld violation number 4 as written.
Dave Escobar, Vice Chair, I make the motion as stated.
Dina Costa, member, I second it.
Additional conversations?
No?
No? Roll call vote.
Dave Escobar, Vice Chair, yes.
Dina Costa, member, yes.
Carrie Singer, chair, yes. Great, those are all our violations addressed. At this time, we can adjourn, is that how?
Close the hearing?
Close the hearing already, right? Do I have to make a formal motion to
Yeah,
close first?
motion to
And then
close
a
the
formal
hearing.
motion to close the hearing, the meeting, correct? Okay, I just want to make sure. All right, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn the public hearing at 2:23 PM.
Dave Escobar, Vice Chair, I make the motion as stated.
Dina Costa, member, I second it.
Discussion?
No.
Nope, call for the vote.
Yes.
Yes.
Carrie Singer, chair, yes. And I will entertain a motion to adjourn the Board of Health meeting at 2:23 PM.
Before we adjourn the meeting, we just need to decide on our next Board of Health meeting. I
Oh,
don't know if you
sorry.
received my
Yeah.
email, no, I just wanted to, bring that up for discussion.
I did see that, I was gonna,
So normally it would have been May 4th, but we have town meeting. I did have an MRC event scheduled the following Wednesday, May 11th. I can move that, or we can move the Board of Health meeting to a different day of the week, that first week in May or the second week in May, whatever the board prefers.
Can we try to do a different time on the 4th? I tried to get that off really hard.
we can't do the 4th at all, though, right?
I don't think so.
Because it's town
Because
meetings.
it's town meeting. It starts at 7.
Can you do the 11th, Dina?
No.
Okay.
You can count me out for the next one if it's a Wednesday, because I'm out in May.
Is there-
Every Wednesday.
Is there any other day of the week in the
Oh,
first
yeah.
or second week of May that would work?
How about you guys?
I pretty much,
You
I
night
work
shift.
nights, so if I have, yeah,
It's the evening, I'm available.
it's Dina's schedule that. No, don't feel bad, like,
I could do the 2nd, or the 2nd is a Monday.
Yep. Should we just do that at 6?
second's a Monday, yes, that'll be fine.
At 6?
Mhm.
At
We would have it here.
here? Okay. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. So, All right, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the Board of Health, regularly scheduled Board of Health meeting at 2:25 PM.
Make the motion as stated.
Dina Costa, I second it.
Any discussion?
No?
Nope, call for the vote.
Yes?
Yes.
Carrie Singer, chair, yes. Meeting adjourned.